I want to start by saying that I know how this is going to sound. I've been sitting here for 6 hours trying to figure out how to write this in a way that doesn't make me seem unhinged, and I've come to the conclusion that there isn't one. So I'm just going to tell you what happened in the order it happened, and you can decide for yourself. My name is Daniel Marsh. I'm 34 years old. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have a cat named Potato and a studio apartment that smells like old radiator and whatever my upstairs neighbor is always cooking. Oregano, I think, maybe coming. I've never been able to figure it out. I'm telling you these normal things because I need you to understand that I am a normal person. I fix cars on the weekends. I call my mom on Sundays. I have a library card I've used twice. I am not someone to whom strange things happen. Or I wasn't. The job came through a staffing agency. I'd been doing data entry for a logistics company for 3 years, and the position got eliminated in a restructuring, which is a corporate way of saying that they found someone overseas who would do it for a fraction of what I made. I was collecting unemployment and burning through savings when the agency called and said they had a remote position doing medical transcription for a company called Verdant Health Solutions. Flexible hours, decent pay. All I had to do was listen to recorded audio of physicians dictating patients' notes and type what they said. The agency said the role was specifically overnight, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., because Verdant's transcription backlog was worse during those hours when their in-house staff clocked out. I took it the same day they offered it. The work was straightforward. Physicians dictate their notes into a recording app, and the recordings get uploaded to Verdant's servers. I'd log in, claim a file from the queue, then put on my headphones and type what I heard. Medication names, patient histories, procedure notes, discharge summaries. Nothing glamorous. A lot of abbreviations to memorize. But it was honest work and it paid. And I could do it from my desk in my apartment in my underwear, which honestly is the dream. The audio quality varied. Some physicians spoke clearly and slowly, like they were reading from a textbook. Others sounded like they were dictating from inside a moving vehicle with the windows down. Some recordings had background noise, other voices, and the occasional distant PA announcement that told you that they were still in the hospital when they recorded. None of that was unusual. I learned to filter it out. I worked the job for 11 weeks before anything went wrong. The first thing I noticed wasn't frightening. It was just strange enough that I rewound the clip and listened again. It was a discharge summary for a patient with a broken wrist. Standard stuff. The physician was Dr. Elaine Chu, whose voice I recognized because she dictated often and spoke fast, swallowing the ends of her words. She was describing the patient's follow-up instructions when I heard something between two of her sentences. It was quiet. Barely there. I'd been half asleep at my desk with bad coffee going cold beside me, and I caught it only because I was wearing good headphones. The noise-canceling kind I bought when I thought I was going to become a podcast person 3 years ago. In the half-second pause between Dr. Chu ending one sentence and beginning the next, something said, "There." Not a word, just the sound of a word. Barely a breath. "There." I sat up, rewound it, listened with my eyes closed. There it was, soft as a thought. I shrugged it off. Background noise. Someone passing Dr. Chu in a corridor. A sound from a television in a patient room down the hall, carried in through an open door. I transcribed the file, submitted it, pulled the next one from the queue, and forgot about it. 2 nights later, I heard it again. Different file, different physician, a Dr. Ose who had a measured, almost formal way of dictating, every word placed with precision. He was summarizing a colonoscopy when I heard it in a gap between sentences. Same quality, same soft, close to the mic presence that made it sound less like something in a room and more like something in the recording device itself. This time it wasn't there. It was a name. I couldn't catch it. I rewound twice, 3 times, had the volume all the way up. It was definitely a name. Definitely 2 syllables. But the second listen actually made me less certain than the first because it was so close to silence that my brain may have been filling in the shape of language where there was only static. I told myself that, and I almost believed it. Here's the thing about overnight transcription work. It is, without exaggeration, the loneliest job I have ever had. There's no coworkers to send a message to, no shared coffee machine, no ambient noise of an office. There is you and a dark outside your window and stranger's voice in your ears describing other strangers' bodies. After a while, the voices become familiar. The positions you hear most often become something like company, and you start to notice the texture of the silence between their words in the same way you notice a new sound in your apartment at night. I started paying attention to the silences. Not obsessively, not at first. I began listening differently, with a part of my brain dedicated to catching anything that wasn't the physician's voice. And over the next 2 weeks, I found things. Small things. Almost nothing. A single syllable in a file from Dr. Patel. Something that might have been a number in a file from a surgeon whose name I can't remember. A sound in a respiratory therapy note that wasn't breathing but was shaped like breathing. I started keeping a document, a separate window I'd minimize when I was transcribing. Just a plain text file where I jot down the file number and timestamp what I thought I heard. By the end of week 13, it had 9 entries. None of them made sense individually. Together, I couldn't see a pattern either. But the act of putting them in a list made the hairs on my arms stand up in a way I couldn't articulate. Like seeing individual puzzle pieces that don't reveal the image, but somehow convey that the image is going to be something you don't want to see. I want to be precise about the timeline because I think it matters. Week 14 was the week the file started to change. The first sign was the length. Verdant's filing system showed basic metadata when you claimed a file from the queue. Physician name, file type, duration. Most files ran between 2 and 8 minutes. That's normal for dictation. On the first night of week 14, I claimed a file listed at 14 minutes, which wasn't unheard of for longer procedure notes, and when I put my headphones on and pressed play, the first 4 minutes were standard. Dr. Reyes, an internist, discussing a patient with poorly managed type 2 diabetes. Normal language, normal pace. Then Dr. Reyes finished. The file did not. I kept typing for a moment out of habit before I realized that I'd stopped hearing words and started hearing something else. Not silence. The recording was still active. There was the low, warm hiss of a live microphone. Somewhere in that hiss, very far away, a sound I couldn't identify. Almost like movement. Like something shifting its weight. I sat with my hands over the keyboard. 10 more minutes of that sound. 10 minutes of whatever was making it getting, by increments so small I kept questioning whether I was imagining it, slightly closer. By the time the file ended, my hands were shaking, and I didn't know why. I closed the file without submitting it, opened a new one, and sat for a long time looking at the start button without pressing it. I pressed it. The next file was normal, and the one after. I worked until 7 a.m. and then I went to bed and slept until 2 in the afternoon. And when I woke up, I had already decided that I was going to listen to the abnormal file again, carefully, with better notes. I logged in, found the file in my incomplete queue, put my headphones on. The first 4 minutes were still Dr. Reyes, still normal. Then he finished. The ambient hissed. And this time, listening for it, I heard what was in the hiss. It was not movement. It was whispering. 2 voices, maybe 3, layered in a way that made them impossible to separate, speaking too low and too fast to catch individual words. It was like hearing a conversation through 3 closed doors. I knew the shape of language was there. I could not reach through far enough to touch it. I noted the file number, submitted it with Dr. Reyes' transcription and a note in the comments field that said, approximately 10 minutes of non-physician audio following dictation, possible recording error, flag for review. I never heard back from anyone at Verdant about that flag. I flagged 2 more files over the following week. No response. The system accepted the submissions and they vanished into whatever process handled them on the other end, and I received my usual automated confirmation emails. I went looking for a Verdant Health Solutions employee to contact directly. This sounds easy. It was not. The company's website had a contact form and a general email address and a phone number that, when I called it, played hold music for 40 minutes before disconnecting. The staffing agency had a liaison, a woman named Patricia, who'd I spoken to during onboarding, but when I emailed her, she sent back a reply that said she passed my concerns to the relevant team and I should expect to hear from someone within 5 business days. No one contacted me within 5 business days. The files kept coming. The anomalies became more frequent. Not in every file, but often enough that I started looking forward to them the way you look forward to something you know is bad for you. The sounds in the silences became more distinct. Sometimes I heard what were clearly words, though never quite clearly enough to write down. Once I heard what sounded like a laugh, not a cruel laugh or a frightening one, just someone, somewhere in the recording, finding something briefly funny. That was the one that scared me the most out of all of them up to that point. The laugh, because it sounded so human and so present, like the person making it was right beside me rather than wherever the sound had come from. I am going to skip forward now, past 2 weeks of the escalating strangeness, because what happened on the night of March 3rd is what I actually need to tell you about. And I've been circling it for 3,000 words because I am not fully certain I am capable of describing it without sounding like I've lost my mind. I'm going to try. March 3rd, a Tuesday. I clocked in at 11 p.m. as usual. Potato was asleep on the radiator. The city outside my window was doing the things cities do at night, where all the daytime sounds compress into a background hum. I had leftover pasta. I had bad coffee. I had good headphones and a full queue of files and no reason to expect anything different from any other nights. The first 6 files were normal. Hours passed. The pasta got eaten, the coffee got cold, and I drank it anyway. At 3:47 a.m., I claimed the file from the queue. The metadata said, physician, unassigned, file type, autopsy report, duration, 47 minutes, 32 seconds. I paused at the metadata for a moment because I had never transcribed an autopsy report. It wasn't outside the scope of the job. Technically, Verdon's client list included coroner's offices, but the overnight queue was almost always clinical dictation. I noted it as unusual. I pressed play. The audio opened on the standard ambient hiss of a recording device in a quiet room. Then a voice. The voice was male, mid-range, slightly nasal, the kind of voice that belonged to a man who spent a lot of time in rooms that demanded precision. He spoke with a particular flat effect of someone who had described bodies for a living long enough that the words had lost their weight. He said, "Preliminary external examination. Subject is a white male, apparent age middle 30s, height approximately 5 feet 11 inches, weight estimated at 172 pounds. I was typing. That's important. I was in transcription mode, the part of my brain that processes language for conversion to text running on something close to autopilot. So the next sentence was already half typed before the meaning of it caught up to me. Subject presents with brown hair approximately 2 inches in length and a scar approximately 3 centimeters long on the lateral aspect of the left forearm, consistent with an old laceration. My hand stopped. I have a scar on my left forearm. 3 centimeters, give or take. I got it at 17 when I put my arm through a window screen trying to reach a basketball that had gone over the first floor railing of my childhood home. The scar is lateral. It is exactly where the voice just said. I sat very still. The rational part of my brain was already generating explanations. Scars on left forearms were common. Height and weight and hair description matched a lot of people. The voice was describing a generic white man in his 30s, and I am a generic white man in my 30s, and the overlap meant nothing. I pressed play again. Subject has a small tattoo on the interior of the right wrist. Text reads, steady, single word, block lettering, approximately 1 inch in height. The word steady is tattooed on the inside of my right wrist. I got it at 26, the week after my father died, in a tattoo parlor in Durham that has since closed. The artist's name was Marco. The tattoo took 40 minutes. I pulled off my headphones. I sat at my desk in my apartment and I looked at my wrist and I said out loud to nobody, "Okay." The way you say okay when a thing happens that you have no immediate framework for. The place holding okay. The okay that means I am receiving this information and I am filing it somewhere and I will know how to respond to it in a moment. The moment came and I did not know how to respond. I put the headphones back on. I am not certain why. Some part of me understood that not listening was not going to make whatever was in this file go away. The voice had kept going. I rewound to where I'd stopped. Subject has a small tattoo on the interior of the right wrist. Text reads, steady, single word, block lettering, approximately 1 inch in height. No other visible tattoos. Fingernails trimmed. No evidence of a struggle under the nails. Hands show mild callousing consistent with manual labor. I fix cars on the weekends. My hands are calloused. Preliminary examination notes a crescent-shaped birthmark on the subject's left hip, approximately 2 centimeters consistent with a Mongolian spot that failed to fully fade in adolescence. I have that birthmark. I have always had it. My mother used to call it my moon. I'm going to tell you something that I want you to sit with for a moment. I want you to imagine sitting at your desk in your quiet apartment at 3:50 in the morning with your cat asleep on the radiator and a city humming outside and a voice in your headphones methodically describing your body. I want you to imagine every feature it names being a feature you have, not similar features, not approximate features. The specific constellation of marks and measurements that makes up the physical document of you being read out loud by a stranger in a room you cannot see. I want you to imagine what it does to your understanding of time, because that was the thing that was happening to me that I couldn't immediately name. It wasn't fear, though fear was there, rising through me like water through a cracked foundation. It was something more disorienting than fear. It was the sensation of time coming loose, of the present moment suddenly failing to hold its edges. This file had been created before I opened it. It existed in a queue. It had a duration of 47 minutes and 32 seconds. The metadata had assigned it no physician. Someone had made this recording, uploaded it to a server, and it had sat in a queue waiting to be claimed. And I had claimed it at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and the voice inside it was describing my body in past tense. Subject presents. That's present tense, technically, the present of the examination. But an autopsy report is always written about someone who is gone. The examination is present tense. The subject is past tense. That's the grammar of it. I was the subject. I pressed play. The voice moved into what it called the internal examination, and I'm going to be honest with you and say, I cannot tell you everything it described. I am going to tell you what I need to tell you and leave the rest of the part of my memory where I am trying to keep it contained. The cause of death it listed was asphyxiation, manual strangulation. The evidence it cited was specific. Petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, bruising patterns on the neck consistent with hands rather than a ligature, damage to certain structures in the throat whose names I have since looked up and wish I hadn't. The estimated time of death it gave was between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. The date it gave was March 6th. When I listened to this recording, it was the early hours of March 3rd. 3 days. The voice finished the physical examination and moved into what it called circumstantial notes, which is apparently a section where the pathologist records non-physical observations. It said, subject was found in his place of residence at approximately 7 a.m. by a neighbor responding to a missed welfare check. Apartment showed no sign of forced entry. No defensive injuries on the subject. Door was locked from the inside. My apartment door has a deadbolt that locks from the inside. Nothing in the scene indicated the presence of another party. Investigators have not ruled out a third-party scenario, but at the time of examination, circumstances are consistent with a medical event subsequently reclassified pending these findings. That is the language of bureaucratic horror. I have read that sentence many times now. It means we thought natural causes, but the bruising changed that. I stopped the recording. I want to tell you that I did something rational at this point. Called the police, called a friend, called anyone. I sat on my desk for probably 20 minutes without moving. Here's the thing about something that can't be real. You spend the 20 minutes trying to find the door out of it. You test the exits, recording error, coincidence, prank, Someone at Verdant with access to my personal information. That last one I kept coming back to, trying to stretch it far enough to cover everything I'd heard. Employee prank, social engineering. Someone had looked me up, found photos with the tattoo visible, and constructed a file designed to unsettle me. The birthmark stopped that theory. My birthmark is not visible in any photo I've ever taken or been tagged in. My mother knew about it. 2 ex-girlfriends knew about it. That was the complete list. I opened the file again. I skipped to the section I hadn't listened to yet. The file still had about 20 minutes remaining after where I stopped. I moved the playhead forward and landed somewhere in the middle of what sounded like a summary section. The voice said, "Reviewing the subject's personal effects recovered from the scene, the investigators noted a laptop computer open to a browser window displaying a forum post the subject appeared to have been writing at the time of the incident. The post was partially completed. The title of the post reads, 'I transcribe medical audio for a living. Last night, I heard my own autopsy.'" I felt my body go cold from the inside out. The post begins, and I am quoting from the preserved screenshot. "I want to start by saying that I know how this is going to sound." My hands were on the keyboard. On my screen was a half-written post. It began, "I want to start by saying that I know how this is going to sound." The voice in the recording was quoting my post back to me. A post I was in the process of writing. A post that, at the moment I was listening to this, existed only on my screen, unsaved, not yet submitted to any platform, not yet visible to any other person in the world. There is a specific kind of wrongness that you feel in your body before your mind catches up. It starts at the base of your spine. I felt it. The voice was still speaking. The post continues for several pages and documents the subject's experience transcribing anomalous audio files over a period of approximately 14 weeks. It ends mid-sentence, suggesting the subject was interrupted. Interrupted? I pushed my chair back from the desk. Potato had woken up. She was sitting on the radiator looking at me with the flat assessment that cats have. The look that means, "I have noticed you are behaving unusually and I am recording this for my own purposes." "It's fine," I said to her. My voice was even. I didn't trust it. I got up and checked my door. Deadbolt thrown, chain on. I checked the windows, all 3 of them latched. I went to the bathroom and turned on the light and stood there for a moment in the brightness, breathing. Then I went back to my desk. The voice in the recording had kept going. I can hear it from the headphones sitting on the desk. Tiny and thin without my ears inside them. Just the ghost of a voice. I picked them up and put them on. The incomplete nature of the subject's post raises questions investigators have been unable to solve. The final legible section of the post reads, "I want to tell you that I did something rational at this point. Called the police, called a friend, called anyone. I sat at my desk for probably 20 minutes without moving." That was 9 minutes ago. I checked the timestamp on my phone. It quoted me exactly. I need you to understand what this means. The file was describing something I had written 9 minutes ago before the voice appeared to be quoting it. But the file had been uploaded to Verdant's server before I started writing. It had a queue position. It had metadata. I had claimed it at 3:47 a.m. and that claim was logged, which means the file existed in the system before 3:47 a.m., which means it existed before I wrote the words the voice was reading. The only framework I had was that someone had written the post for me, had known what I would write before I wrote it and had incorporated that into a recording, and then somehow gotten that recording into a medical transcription queue for a company I had been working for by pure chance for 14 weeks. That framework was insane. The voice was still going. I listened. Subject's digital footprint indicates increased internet activity in the weeks preceding death, primarily related to searches for verdant health solutions, audio anomalies in medical recordings, and, in the 72 hours prior, searches related to the subject's own name, death records, and query reading. How to know if something is real. I had not searched for any of those things. The searches regarding my own name and death records were things I had not yet thought to do. But the file was saying I would do them in the next 72 hours before March 6th. I was going to go look for myself. There is a part of this that I have been sitting with ever since, a thought that goes in a circle and never resolves. If the recording already contained the final sections of my post, then at some point I finished writing it. At some point between now and March 6th, I wrote everything after the halfway point. I wrote the ending, and then someone had enough time to record an autopsy report that quoted it before I died. Either the recording came from somewhere after my death, which meant someone had retrieved and recorded information from an event that hadn't happened yet, or I wrote the ending of the post with full knowledge of what was in the recording. I don't know which of these possibilities is worse. Here is what I know about the next 72 hours because the recording told me, and because I have to assume it is accurate. I will search for myself. I will search for verdant health solutions more deeply than I have before, and I will find something. The recording mentions this obliquely. In a section, it appears to quote from the detective's notes. Subject appears to have identified the origin of the files in the hours before death, based on a partially visible browser tab reading, "What is verdant?" The detective's notes continues. Tab closed. Content inaccessible. I'm going to find something, and I'm not going to get to tell anyone what it is, unless this post is the telling. I've been thinking about that since I went back to my desk and kept writing. The recording said the post ends mid-sentence. The investigation couldn't recover the rest. But I know how posts work. They go up. They stay up. Maybe the ending gets written and published before whatever is coming on March 6th, and then it's out here, preserved, and it doesn't matter that my browser tab is closed because it's already been read. Maybe that's why I'm writing so much. Maybe I'm trying to outrun the mid-sentence. Let me tell you what I know about the sounds I heard in the earlier files. The things I wrote off as background noise, as artifacts of recording, as my tired brain fighting language and static. I've been going back through my notes document, the ones I've been keeping for weeks in the minimized window, and I think I understand now what they were. They were earlier versions of this. The single syllable I heard in the first file, the one that sounded like there. I think it was the end of a word. I think it was the end of right there. Someone pointing. The name I couldn't catch 2 nights later. The 2-syllable name I could never resolve clearly enough to write down. I think it was my name. I think it was Daniel, said softly, at a distance by a voice that was not meant to be heard. But heard by whom? The physician dictating the file had finished and left. The recording device had kept running. And in the room where the device was running, something was discussing me. For weeks, before I noticed the first file, before I thought to start my notes document, Something in the recording infrastructure of a medical transcription company was having a conversation about me. I don't know what Verdant Health Solutions is. I have tried to find it. The website is real. It has testimonials and a professional design and a privacy policy and all the things a legitimate company has. The phone number that disconnects is real in the sense that something answers it and plays hold music before cutting you off. The staffing agency that hired me is real. Patricia is real. I've met her on a video call. But Verdant's listed address is a building in Charlotte that, according to Google Street View, is a parking structure. Their listed founding year on LinkedIn is 2019, and their employee count is listed as 11 to 50. But I have interacted with nothing at the company except automated systems and Patricia's liaison role through the agency. I have never communicated with anyone at Verdant directly. I have never received a call from a Verdant number. When I have submitted flagged files, the flags have been accepted by the system and then nothing has happened. I work for an automated queue managed by software, and I have assumed a company sits behind it because there is a website that says so. What if there isn't? What if the queue is the company? What if the recordings are the product and the transcription is the process by which the recordings are heard, and the people who hear them are the point? I'm writing that, and it doesn't make sense. And I'm going to leave it there anyway, because it's the closest I can get to the shape of what I think is happening. Here's what the recording said about the anomalous files, the ones with extended audio after the physician's dictation ended. It mentioned them specifically in the context of the investigating detective's summary. I'm going to paraphrase because I was listening fast and my notes aren't perfect. The detective describes the subject, meaning me, having flagged multiple files containing non-standard audio content. The detective notes that a review of these files was requested, but that the files in question could not be located in Verdant's server archive. This is consistent with routine data pruning, and the detective does not appear to pursue it further. The files were erased, but I flagged them. They were in my submitted queue. I have the file numbers in my notes document. If the files were erased, then something at Verdant, or whatever Verdant is, erased them after I submitted them. Something was watching what I flagged and removing the evidence. I want to be precise about what that implies. If the sounds in those files were accidental, erasing them wouldn't matter. Accidental anomalies are corrected and forgotten. You erase things that are deliberate. You erase things that, if examined, will reveal something you don't want revealed. I've been transcribing for something that has been watching me transcribe. That has been having conversations about me in the silence of its own recordings. That has a file describing my death already written and loaded into a queue, waiting for me to claim it and hear it. And I did. And I did. And I'm still sitting at my desk at whatever time it is now. I've stopped checking, and I'm writing this instead of doing the rational things. And I think I understand why. Because the rational things are all going to happen anyway. I'm going to call someone tomorrow. I'm going to search my own name. I'm going to find something in a browser tab that closes. The recording has already told me that in the outline language of detective notes. The only thing that isn't in the recording is this. However many words I'm writing right now that go past whatever the detective screenshot captured, I don't know how much further that is. I don't know if I'm there yet. Let me put down everything I can while I'm still ahead of it. The recording played for another 8 minutes after it quoted my post. I want to tell you what was in those 8 minutes. I listened to them 3 times and I took notes, and I've been building up to saying this because it is the part I am least certain I should share. and also the part I'm most certain I have to. In those 8 minutes, the voice finished the autopsy summary and moved into a section it called Supplemental Observations, which isn't, as far as I've been able to find in the last few hours, a standard section of an autopsy report. The voice effect changed slightly. Still clinical, still measured, but slower, more deliberate, like someone choosing words carefully rather than reading from a form. The supplemental observations said the following things. First, the subject's occupation as a medical transcriptionist was not coincidental. The hiring was facilitated. Patricia is real, but the agency referral to Verdon was not a standard placement. The file suggests, without elaborating how the detective knew this, that the subject was identified as suitable in advance of the employment. Suitable for what is not specified. Second, the extended audio in the flagged files was, and I'm reading directly from my notes here, consistent with preparatory exposure. The detective quotes what appears to be an internal Verdon document. Subjects are introduced to embedded audio on a graduated basis to assess perceptual sensitivity and threshold development. Perceptual sensitivity, threshold development. Whatever was in those silences, in those 10 minutes of whispering after the physician stopped talking, was a test of how well I could hear it. And the fact that I heard it, that I caught there in a half-second gap, that I started keeping a notes document, that I never just turned off the file and went back to email, I passed. And then they gave me the final exam. Third, and this is the one I've been sitting with for an hour now, the one I can't find the way around. The supplemental observations note that subjects who successfully receive and process the primary file exhibit a statistically significant behavioral response cluster, including extended writing, reduced mobility, and a delay in seeking external assistance that the subject consistently attributes to disbelief. I have been sitting at this desk writing for hours. I have not called anyone. I attribute the delay to disbelief. It says that. It says I would do this, and I am doing it. And I cannot tell if my doing it is because I was always going to, or because the act of reading it made it happen. That distinction feels important, and I can't get to the bottom of it. I'm going to call someone. I need to say that clearly for myself, out loud, in this text. I'm going to finish this post, and I'm going to call my friend Garrett. And I am going to tell him what I heard, and I'm going to send him this post. And then I'm going to be somewhere else on March 6th when whatever is supposed to happen is supposed to happen. The recording said I die alone in my apartment. I don't have to be in my apartment. I keep reading that and trying to find a seam in it that lets me out. That's the thing about this. The thing that I think was the point of making me hear it. I don't know if the file is a document of something fixed or a warning I can do something about. I don't know if the people who made it want me to run or want me to stay put, and if there's even a difference from their position. What I know is that I'm on the internet right now. Whatever I write here gets seen by other people. The detective's notes described a screenshot of my screen as evidence collected from the scene, which means that by March 6th, nobody had read this far. This exists in a screenshot on an evidence table somewhere. Evidence in a case that is eventually, as the recording noted at the very beginning, reclassified from a medical event pending autopsy finding. Reclassified to what? It didn't say. But you're reading this now. Right now, while I'm ahead of whatever comes next. And I'm aware that this is what every horror story tries to do. Make you feel like the telling is the intervention. Make you feel complicit in whatever happens if you just read and move on. I read enough r/no sleep to know how it works. This is not no sleep. I want to say that clearly too, for the record, even though I know that's exactly what someone would say in a no sleep post. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Daniel Marsh. I have a cat named Potato and a scar on my left forearm and a tattoo that says steady that I got the week my father died because I was 26 and falling apart and I needed to put a word somewhere I could see it. I am a real person writing a real thing that happened. I'm going to do the rational things now. I'm going to call Garrett. I'm going to screenshot everything in my notes document and email it to myself and to him. I'm going to call the police non-emergency line and try to explain this in a way that doesn't result in a welfare check that becomes its own kind of trap. There are 3 days between now and March 6th. 3 days is enough time to not be alone in an apartment with a locked deadbolt and no sign of forced entry. I'm going to finish this post. I'm going to hit submit. If you're reading this, then whatever happens next, this part existed. I heard the file. I wrote the post. I got ahead of the detective's screenshot. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it changes the ending. I keep thinking about the word steady. What I meant when I put it on my wrist. My father was not a steady man. He was good, but he was not steady. And when he died, I understood that steadiness was not something he'd been able to give me by example, and that I was going to have to construct it myself from something, and I chose to construct it from the simplest possible instruction. Be steady. When the floor goes, be steady. When the thing that can't be real turns out to be real, when the autopsy report is already written and you're still sitting at the keyboard, when the rational explanation runs out of road, be steady. Be steady. I'm going to call Garrett now. I want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to submit this, and I'm going to pick up my phone. One more thing about the last 8 minutes of the recording, the supplemental section, the slow, careful voice. At the very end of it, before the file clicked off and the queue registered it as complete, the voice says something that was not in the detective's notes section and was not labeled as belonging to any category of the report. It was different in register from everything else. Not the flat professional effect of a man who describes bodies for a living. Something warmer. Something that, if I'm being fully honest with you, at whatever hour this is in the quiet of my apartment, sounded almost like it was sorry. It said, "He hears everything. That was always the problem. And the gift, he heard us from the start." I don't know what that means. I'm going to find out, or I am going to not find out. And the distance between those two outcomes is 3 days, and I am picking up my phone right now. I am pressing Garrett's name. I am watching it ring. Be steady. ETA. Garrett didn't pick up. It's almost 6 a.m. I'm going to try again in a few hours. I sent him a link to this post. I'm not going to be alone on March 6th. I'm not going to be in this apartment. If you came here from his share or from wherever this ends up, thank you for reading this far. It matters that you did. I don't know exactly why. It just does. ETA 2. Something I forgot to include. The recording right at the start of the supplemental section, mentioned that the subject had worked the overnight shift for 14 weeks. 14 weeks of claiming files in the dark, of putting in the headphones and listening. It said, extended overnight exposure appears to have been significant. I have been looking at that sentence in my notes for an hour. Significant for what? The voice didn't say. But I think I can hear the answer now. Sitting here in the hour before dawn with everything quiet. I think I've been able to hear it for a while. Building at the edge of things, just below the threshold of the words. Not frightening exactly. More like a sound you've been hearing without knowing it, and then suddenly you know it, and it was there the whole time, and you can't unhear it. Something is paying attention. It has been paying attention since before I started listening. And I think if I sit very still and don't try to name it, I can almost hear what it wants to say. Don't. I know. I'm putting the headphones down. Calling Garrett now.